Okay, here we are in the how to tune a snare lesson. And you just probably came from the how to tune your toms, where we had the whole family of toms up and we were being very careful about top and bottom pitch relationship. We had them tuned exactly the same pitches and to an interval of a musical fourth or a perfect fourth. With the snare, it's just a couple of different, slightly different things that we usually do to tune the drum. On the bottom and the top, the tension and pitch relationship, usually, this is sort of the generalization, take these guidelines and break the rules. Usually the bottom head is just very tight, and that's a response thing, so the stick, your feel feels really good, and you get a lot of bounce and rebound, and also the snares that are on the bottom of the drum, so that they can interact with the drum as best as possible. And when you have a lot tighter of a tension than maybe might feel traditional, these snares rattle and interact in a very nice way with the head. So generally, it's pretty darn tight. And so that being said, we are going to tune this Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple snare drum. It actually is the matching model to the kit that we're going to be working with, but it's a slightly different finish. It's brand new out of the box. And I couldn't actually find the matching kit to that drum set, so why not use this? It's the same darn drum. It's brand new, and it kind of looks cool. It's got a cool finish. It's the 50th anniversary. I'm not actually going to swap this head out. It is a brand new head from the factory, and so with the bottom snare side drum head, the frequency that will change that out is going to be pretty rare, depending on how much you're playing the drum. And of course, if the head gets damaged at all, then you're going to be likely to change it out more often. With the bottom head, you can probably leave it on, say if you're practicing, about 5 times per week, just for at least 20, 30 minutes, even maybe a little bit more. I probably wouldn't change this bottom Rezo snare side head for months and months and months, at least like a half year or so. The top head is probably going to be very frequent if you're playing the same snare drum, maybe once a month and possibly less depending on what snare head that you put on, if you put on a thinner head. And similar, and so that's not similar, it's a little bit faster than the toms actually. The toms you would probably change out if you're playing that same frequency in a week, every week. The top heads, you probably change them out maybe once every 2 months, maybe a little bit less if you feel like they're starting to get dead on you or get dents in them. And the bottom Rezo head on the toms is going to be about double the time of the tops if you are playing that frequently. Of course, if you're playing less frequently, which I hope you are not, or your musicians that you're working with, then you're going to change the bottom heads, in a longer interval of time. So let's get started on this bottom head. Let's just see where it's at from the factory here. So it's actually pretty tight already, right from the actual factory tension. I haven't touched this drum top or bottom, and I think I'm going to go a little bit higher on it, just because I kind of know that starting point is going to be a little bit higher in pitch and I can feel it it's got a little bit of give to it. So I'm going to crank it up, and so let's just get started here. And basically we're going to use the exact same technique with the toms. We're going to go lug to lug. Listen for the pitch and just match the pitch. And it won't sustain very long, when you hit the note, when you hit beside the lug, because it's so tight and such a thin head, the note just kind of dies right away. So we're just going to do our best to match the pitch of the lugs, and let's check it out. Little tip, we loosen the snare throw off and just put a stick underneath there, wedged over, of course, the rim here, and away from the lug so that you can have the easy access to the tuning. Let's have a listen. Cool, so very slightly I'm hearing these two as a little bit higher and these 6 as a little bit lower. So I'm going to start by bringing the others up and we'll go from there. Cool, so that to me, it feels like it's pretty tight. It's a little bit higher than pitch. I'm gonna roll with that, and we're gonna replace the entire top head, even though it's a brand new head, we're gonna set it aside, and put a new Evans Genera Dry on there. And one thing I wanted to mention with the snare drum, there's something called the snare bed, which actually the bearing edge dips down right here. They cut it lower, and that's to allow the snare wires, when they're tensioned across the drum, to sit nicer on the head, on the drum head. And that gives you sort of a maximum response and bounce happening with the snares across the drum. So it's kind of like a little bed, the snare bed. You got to put the snares in, tuck them into bed there. And, so sometimes you'll see it as a cut that's a lot wider, which usually is a good thing, and sometimes you see it thinner, which can cause weird sympathetic buzzes with your snare drum. Like say, for example, you hit the 12 and buzzes your snare. That can be a bunch of things. That can be both of the drum heads are equally pitched, and so they're going to resonate with each other for starters, which also excites this and the snares. But also sometimes it's the snare bed is not cut nicely, and that causes a problem. And also sometimes it's like your actual snare wires may be broken or bent or something like that. So definitely check that is all looking good and healthy on your drum. And so let's flip it over to the top. And so we are just going to use the exact same process. I'm going to grab the drill so I can quickly unscrew the lugs. We're going to speed up the footage or cut out just a little bit of the redundant sort of things that we're doing in the tuning. And I will get our drum head on here and start tuning it up. Okay, so we have the brand new Evans Genera HD Dry head on here, and this is, you notice it has these little perforations in it, has a control ring on the other side. So this drum head alone, as you would have found in the drum head lesson section, it will dry up the sound a lot. It will muffle the sound just within the technology inside of the head, which is why it's called Evans HD Dry. It dries it up. And so we have it finger tight around all the lugs as much as I can handle. Again, these absolute lugs, the Yamaha absolute lugs, I can't quite finger tight them as much as I would be able to on a different type of drum. And so at this point, it's quite equal tension all around. I don't really have, the ripples out of the drum. And so then, at this point, then I'm going to double key it because there are extra lugs around this snare drum, more so than like on a tom. It's a bit of a bigger drum. And so we're just going to go around the whole drum starting with one full turn, maybe two full turns at the start, because there's a lot of tension that needs to be placed on the snare drum specifically. And then from there, we'll start to get a pitch sounding out of the drum. And there's really not too much to this. I'm not yet going to reference the pitch of this drum compared to the toms. In this scenario, I'm not going to do that until we put all of the drums up in the air at the kit, and in which case it'd be very easy to change the pitch of the snare in relation to the toms. So let's do this. I'm going to start listening to the pitch here. So it's very low, but it's starting to hold a pitch. I'm going to start stretching it just a little bit, again with the meat of the hands, not the knuckles. Okay, and now I'm just going to listen to the pitch. Probably won't be holding a pitch at all here. Great, and so let's start getting it back up. I'm going to do the double drum key just to save some time again. This is just a quarter turn. Cool. And now, I still want to bring the whole drum up a little bit in general pitch before I start looking at each individual lug. Quarter turn on this one, and notice every single turn I'm hitting the drum to see where that pitch is as I go along so that I don't overshoot it. Cool, that's a good point. Stretch it some more. Love the squeak in that. Okay. And let's listen to this. Now we're going to go around to each individual lug and see how matched or unmatched the pitches are of them, and I will tweak accordingly, and away we go. Actually hearing that they're somewhat even. It's pretty dry because of the drum head, which is great, but it also makes it a little bit tougher to discern the pitch. So maybe when you're first learning with this, you might want to try a thinner head or something that doesn't have as much control technology inside of it. But what I am hearing is that these opposing lugs are just a little bit higher. At this point, what am I going to do? Am I going to try to bring everything up? Well, let's see. At this point, before going and evening those out, let's just start to hear what the drum sounds like as a drum a little bit. Okay, so the overall pitch of the drum actually sounds pretty snarey. It sounds like it should, like a snare drum. So I'm not really going to try to go higher or lower. Let's just try to even out the pitches as best as possible. Cool, it's getting more even there. Let's check this out as a drum. Snares off. Please ignore my shanty drum techniques. Yeah, so that is sounding like a snare drum should. And I say should. How do we know that from the start? Well, the best frame of reference is your catalog of music that you've been listening to your entire life, your favorite drummers, your favorite music. You kind of know what that snare drum is that you're trying to achieve, or at least the pitch of it. In some situations, you might be looking for a really high pitch, just a little bit of a decay as well. So just a high pitch crack more so, and not much sound in the drum. And that could be multi-genre. It could be used in a funk thing, even a metal thing. Or you could be going for a fat with pH sound drum, snare drum, where it's very low pitch sounding. You actually feel a lot of bass energy coming out of the drum, and also again maybe not much decay. But this is sort of the centralized, templated, de facto snare drum sound that I'm looking for as a generalized snare drum to show and demonstrate for you guys today. And so that is pretty much it for tuning a snare drum. Like I said, at this point, I'll start to compare the pitch and the feel and sort of the overall timbre of the snare drum compared to the toms. Traditionally I'd have the snare next to the toms as well. I might check that on the ground, or in this, like we were doing in our situation, I won't even reference the pitch of this to the toms until we put everything up on the kit and make it a real world situation. Of course, that's where everything either makes it or breaks it. It's definitely going to make it, and it'll sound awesome. So that being said, practice tuning your snare drum, your friends, snare drums in the music store, as long as they will let you tune them. Buy some drum heads, get some used drum heads, experiment with different styles and models, makes and models on your snare drum. Just tune it, detune it, and tune it back up, and just practice, practice, practice on it. Again, give yourself the best conditions to perceive the pitch, not much stuff around you, so you can hear the pitch of the lugs among one another. Practice a ton, and then once you get this going on, we're going to go over to the bass drum, the last individual voice in the kit, before we put it all together. I'll see you in that lesson.